It was an ordinary evening. Or so I thought. The kind of evening when you find yourself unwinding after a long day, settling into the familiar rhythms of home. The kind of evening where you don't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. And yet, that night would be forever etched into my memory, marking the day when everything I thought I knew about the people around me, especially my neighbor, would come crashing down. What transpired between us in the hours that followed would change my perception of him, of trust, and of my own vulnerability. My neighbor had always been a familiar presence in my life. We had exchanged greetings in the hallway and often spoke casually about the neighborhood, talking about the weather, or gossiping about other tenants. Nothing about our interactions suggested any real connection. But I didn't mind. He was just another person in the building, one who didn't stand out. Someone I assumed I could trust based purely on proximity. After all, living in close quarters with others makes you believe you know them better than you actually do. You assume that the mundane conversations are enough to build a picture of someone's character, that the occasional smile in passing means they are harmless, and that their presence is just another part of your routine. That night he knocked on my door, as he had done several times before, but this time, it was different. He wasn't just asking about something trivial. There was a sense of urgency to his knock, a sense of purpose in the way he stood on the other side. I opened the door, expecting to see him with one of those small requests he occasionally had, something as simple as borrowing a cup of sugar or asking if I'd seen his lost cat. But no, this time he was holding a small package. I didn't recognize the name on it, but it was addressed to me. "Hey," he said with his usual warm smile, though it seemed to carry a faint edge of something I couldn't place. "I just got this delivered for you. Thought I'd bring it over." I smiled back, somewhat confused. "Thanks," I said, reaching for the package. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to receive deliveries and pass them along if they were in the area. Still, something about the way he handed me the package made me pause. It was as if his eyes lingered on me a moment longer than necessary, his gaze steady in a way that felt oddly intense. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I noticed how he seemed to take in my appearance, as if he were cataloging every detail of me in a way that made me uncomfortable. But I pushed the feeling aside. I was overthinking things, I told myself. I was just tired, perhaps a little on edge. The package seemed innocent enough, and after all, I had no reason to distrust him. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I turned to leave, but noticed he wasn't moving toward the door. "I was hoping we could talk," he said, and his voice, while soft, carried an unusual weight. "Talk?" I wondered. "About what?" I turned back, trying to keep my tone light. "Sure, but what about?" He didn't immediately answer. Instead, he stepped further into the room. The smile had disappeared from his face, replaced by a look that was almost pained. He shuffled his feet awkwardly, almost like a person searching for the right words but unable to find them. There was an odd discomfort in the air, a heaviness I couldn't ignore. There's something I need to get off my chest," he finally said, his voice low. I glanced at the door. I should have excused myself right then and there, told him I wasn't in the mood to talk, or simply made some excuse about having other things to do. But for reasons I still cannot explain, I didn't. I stood there, hesitant, watching him as he looked at the floor. His hands twitched nervously by his sides, and a strange tension hung in the air between us. He was close to me now, standing just a few feet away. Something was different about him that night, and it was starting to unsettle me. I took a step back, my instincts telling me to create space between us. But before I could do anything else, he stepped forward, and without warning, he pushed the door closed behind him. I froze. A sick feeling began to churn in my stomach as I turned to face him. "What are you doing?" I asked, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his fingers found the lock on the door, and with a soft click, he locked it behind him. It wasn't a loud sound, but it felt like a cold, final act that sent a shockwave through me. I stood there, caught in disbelief. staring at the man who I had once thought was harmless, wondering how the situation had spiraled so quickly into something I couldn't understand. "I need you to stay in here for a while," he said quietly, but the calmness in his voice only heightened my alarm. "It's important. Please." I could feel my heart racing now, pounding in my chest as adrenaline surged through me. "No! Open the door, now!" He looked at me, his expression almost pitying. "You don't understand. Just hear me out, okay?" My mind raced. Should I call for help? Should I try to break free? Every possibility ran through my head, each more terrifying than the last. But I couldn't let myself panic, not yet. I took a deep breath and tried to assess the situation. The window was too small for me to climb out of. The phone was on the other side of the room, out of reach. And I was alone with him. The thought of being completely trapped in this room with him made my skin crawl. I didn't know what he was capable of, and the fear of the unknown gnawed at me like a constant, suffocating presence. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "Just let me go." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he started talking about his life, about how he'd been struggling with his emotions, how he'd felt isolated and misunderstood by the people around him. It sounded like he was trying to justify his actions, but his words were disjointed, almost as if he didn't entirely believe them himself. The more he spoke, the more I realized something wasn't right, that this was no simple conversation. There was an urgency in his tone, a deep undercurrent of something darker. "I'm not crazy, you know," he said, his voice growing more intense. "I just need someone to understand. I thought you were the one who could listen." I felt trapped, not just physically, but emotionally as well. I wanted to reach out to reassure him, to make him see reason, but I knew deep down that I couldn't. I had to protect myself. He was starting to unravel in front of me, and I didn't know what that meant for both of us. I moved slowly, hoping to remain as calm as possible. "Please," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to go. This isn't right." But he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on mine, no longer friendly but cold and calculating, as if he were measuring every word I spoke, every movement I made. His face was unreadable, and I couldn't tell if he was about to lash out or break down. The uncertainty of the situation was unbearable. Time seemed to stretch on indefinitely. The minutes dragged as I fought to maintain control of my emotions. I kept telling myself to stay calm, that I needed to think my way out of this. But the more I stared at him, the more I realized that whatever I had known about him, whatever comfort I had once taken in the mundane exchanges between us, was all a facade. He wasn't who I thought he was. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of doing things I couldn't predict. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he unlocked the door and stepped back, his shoulders slumping as if the tension had finally drained from him. "You can go," he said, his voice flat, the intensity gone. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the door handle and rushed past him, not daring to look back. The hallway outside seemed like a distant refuge, the air in the building cooler and fresher as I stepped out of the room. I didn't stop to think, didn't stop to process what had just happened. I just needed to escape, to put distance between myself and the man who had just trapped me in that room. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had broken, something irreparable between us. I saw him a few times after that, but our interactions were never the same. The easy conversations we once had were replaced by uncomfortable silences. I couldn't forget what he had done, and I knew that neither could he. It was as if we were both walking around a silent wall that neither of us dared to touch. Trust, once a given, had been shattered. The man I had thought I knew was no longer someone I could count on, and I realized, too late, that the facade of familiarity was just that, a facade. That night changed me. It made me question the boundaries of trust, the limitations of our understanding of those we live alongside. The people around us, no matter how ordinary they seem, can carry secrets, dark and unsettling secrets that remain hidden until it's too late. I had learned this lesson the hard way, through a terrifying encounter that I couldn't have anticipated, but one I would never forget. And as for my neighbor, I couldn't help but wonder if he too had changed, if the events of that night had somehow revealed a truth about himself that he had been hiding, even from himself. In the end, all I knew was that I was no longer safe in the bubble of familiarity I had once shared with him, and that realization, that cold, terrible truth, was one that haunted me long after I'd left that room.